Hello guys, and welcome back for another fun plasticine tutorial. So today we're gonna continue our series of sculpting from real life. So last week we took a look at sculpting some bones, which kind of gave you a feel for sculpting some organic matter that doesn't have a very symmetrical build to it. Bones are rather asymmetrical, meaning that they're uneven from side to side. There's a lot of little, nooks and crevices that are that vary quite drastically. They tend to be an easier thing to sculpt because they don't have to look so perfect. Today, we're going to continue our sculpting from real life, but we're going to do something that's a little bit more symmetric. We're going to do some light bulb sculpting. Now, light bulbs are great for this practice because they are these very symmetrical, very kind of smooth, exact sort of structures. So we have to be a little bit more cognizant of how we are sculpting this and how we're kind of doing our finishing touches. Now, obviously there's all sorts of different shapes and sizes of light bulbs. So you can pick anything that either you have laying around at home, or you can do a Google image search and find just a picture of a light bulb. That works too. It's nice if you have one to kind of like hold in your hand and look at so you can kind of turn. But if you don't have any light bulbs laying around, that's fine. Just go online, you'll find a million pictures of light bulbs. So, we're going to approach this the same way that we've been approaching these sculptures. You can either cut off a chunk and begin carving. I happen to have a lot of kind of scrap plasticine from doing all of my other tutorials. So actually what I'm going to do is I'm just going to compress this stuff all together and see if I can't just work from my scrap material, which this is kind of nice because when you have all this scrap stuff, it's already in smaller chunks, so it's already a little bit softer. And then you can just begin smoothing it all together and squishing it all here and making it into kind of a solid piece. Now, I'm not going to do this the exact size. I'm going to do it a little bit smaller, so it's a little bit more manageable. You guys can do whatever you like. You can make these whatever size you like. It's entirely up to you. Sometimes it's easier to work smaller. Sometimes it's easier to work bigger. If you work bigger, then the details are a little bit bigger and they're a little bit easier to manage. But if you work smaller, sometimes it's a little bit easier to shape the form. So in this case, because I squished this stuff all together, it's just going to be a whole lot of just sculpting here. So it's just going to be a lot of me moving the plasticine around and getting it nice and even. Now, if you take a different approach and you cut off a block, which you can certainly do, and I could cut off a block here, like a big rectangle, and it would be nice because it would already sort of be in the shape, and I could just start carving away from that. So that's a definite viable option here. But I happen to just have all this extra scrap. So I'm just going to continue just smoothing this stuff out. Now, the key to this sculpture is, unlike our bone, we don't really have a lot of those textural elements that you'll see in bones. We have something that it's glass. So it is completely and entirely smooth. So this is going to change how we sculpt this, because if you do end up carving stuff, well, when we carve, right, we get these little carve marks. So we want to make sure that we smooth that stuff all out. So I can use some of my techniques here that I've learned along the way. Like, we can do the carving. But especially when it comes down these little bottom parts, we can start to incorporate some of that layering and some of that other stuff that we talked about. So what I can do is I can get the bulb part sculpted. And then I can start to do a little bit of that layering. So if I get something like this, and you can see I'm trying to get this nice and smooth. Now what I can do is I can take some of this extra plasticine that I have, if I have any laying around. Otherwise, I can just begin to rip some off of my block here. But we can start to do what we talked about, primarily in kind of squishing out some coils. You can hear my dog in the background. It's because the mailman's here. He does not like the mailman. And so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this coil and I'm gonna wrap that coil around. Right? So I have that, which, you know, doesn't look entirely like it, but what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start to flatten that again. So we'll just flatten out one side, and then you start to get like that little lip that you have here. And so that it looks like it's sitting inside there. And we can do this all the way down. Sorry, I should have known better. I picked a bad time to do this. Our mailman comes the same time every day. And my dog does not like him. So we can begin to add these. So I'm just gonna kind of continue these layers on here. And I'm doing this just by adding these coils. I know, good pup, good job, pup, scaring away that mailman. My goodness. Okay, so then we get something like this, and then we can start to smooth this together. And you can see how this all starts to come together. And we can kind of flatten this a little. We can combine this stuff, kind of carve some stuff out. And we can add more and more. And then you can even use tools. Like I can take like just a pen tip and start to smooth this stuff, or a pencil. You know, there's all kinds of tools you can use. We're gonna just kind of keep adding and keep layering that stuff. There's all kinds of fun things you can use for clay tools, pencils, anything that you have kind of laying around. You don't need specific tools for clay. Sure, they make specific tools for clay, and if you have them, great. But, you know, they're not essential. And I'll just keep doing this to build these layers. Create this little threaded effect that we have down here, where the light bulb screws into the little socket thing. You know, same thing. And then smooth this out and keep working and working. So you can see I'm using a bit of this layering effect that I did up here. With the threads here, I'm kind of smoothing them together a little bit more. So it looks less like maybe individual parts and more like that one continuous threaded piece. I can even use the very tip of my finger. Oop, I went a little off track there. But we're starting to get a nice little light bulb there. And maybe I would add another one, and then I could add this bottom piece. I could start sculpting this, you know, add that on. That sort of thing. So then I could go back and I could start finely tuning this. So it's starting to look pretty light bulbish. This has some extra threads. I won't go through the whole thing. But we're starting to get this very nice kind of light bulb look. And again, would want to go back and really smooth that glass out, work on the little details here, this little bottom part. It's kind of this cone shape that flattens out. You want to do your best and get everything to look as natural as possible. Like I said, this is a little bit different from the bone because it's less of that organic shape and it's much more of that very smooth, very man-made, you know, glass type shape. So the sculpting is going to be a little bit different feel from last week. But that's good. That's going to kind of introduce you guys to how to create different textures in plasticine, just like you create different textures when you paint and draw based on the marks that you make on the paper. This is the same thing, but instead of the paper, you know, we're talking about the different marks that we make in the clay and the different textures that we create. So in creating those different textures, it's going to give your piece a different feel. All right, so hopefully this tutorial was helpful in explaining this project and the process. Hopefully you guys got something out of it. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.